All right, beautiful people. So yesterday you reviewed solving one-step equations with Miss Cups, and she decided to add a do-undo chart. And so that's going to be really important for us as we move into the 7th grade two-step equations. So now we're working on two-step equations. And you'll notice that I've created a do-undo chart here that I'd like you to copy. And we're going to add some things. So now our do-undo chart is going to have both an add and subtract section and a multiply and divide section. And we know that when we're adding and subtracting, we're going to have our positive, negative integer table. And when we're multiplying and dividing, we're going to have our integer man. So those are some things we're going to add to the undo-do chart that Miss Cups talked about yesterday. And so again, today we're talking about two-step equations. And so we're going to have two sections for our do-undo chart, okay? So first, let's review. So it says, how do I undo? So if I want to undo something, I'm going to use inverse operations, okay? So what is the opposite of adding? Well, the opposite of adding is subtracting. Okay, the opposite of adding is subtracting. Okay, or I guess subtraction. So the opposite of adding is subtraction. And then what is the opposite of subtraction? Well, the opposite of subtraction would be addition. Okay. And then what's the opposite of multiplying? Well, the opposite of multiplication, which could we see as a dot, we could see it as an X, or we could see it as a parentheses, is going to be the division. And remember, division could be seen like cowboy and horse, or it could be seen with a division symbol. And then again, the opposite of division, right? And again, division could be seen as cowboy and horse, or it could be seen as a division symbol. We would say is multiplication. And remember, multiplication can be seen with a dot, with an X, or with parentheses. Okay? So now that we've reviewed our inverse operations, now let's apply those with our do-undo chart and see what we can come up with, okay? So I am going to solve for X here. And so first things first, I am going to rewrite my problem so that I can decide what this is right here. Okay, so what does it mean when a number and a letter sit side by side? Well, that means multiplication. So I'm going to write 4 times X plus 7 equals 19. And then I'm going to draw my line down my equal sign. All right, now I'm ready to create my do-undo chart. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, okay, I have do and undo. And remember, my first top section is going to be adding and subtracting because we have to get rid of the adding and the subtracting first. So this is going to be adding and subtracting. And then my second one will be the multiplying and dividing. So we have to ask ourselves, what is happening in our problem? Well, we can clearly see right here that what's happening is they are adding 7. So what are they doing? They are adding 7. So how do we undo adding? Well, the opposite or the inverse of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to go ahead and say to undo that, I need to subtract 7. The second step in my problem is to get rid of the multiplying by 4. And again, 4 times X. So I'm going to write, okay, they're multiplying by 4. So what's the opposite? The opposite of multiplying is dividing by 4. And so now that I have my do-undo chart made, I'm going to remind myself of my integer rules. So I may need my positive negative table for the adding and subtracting, and I may need my integer man for the multiplying and dividing. And so we just kind of remind ourselves of those things as we are solving. So again, I drew my line down my equal sign and I am ready to start getting rid of stuff. Well, I know that I need to get rid of my 7 first because that is my first do-undo over here. And so we said the opposite of adding 7 was subtracting 7. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to say, okay, how do I get rid of this 7? I'm going to subtract it. And remember, anything I do to one side, I need to do to the other. So to get rid of this 7 right here, I cross it out and that becomes 0. So I'm going to bring everything else down. I have 4 times x left. And then over here, what is 19 minus 7? Well, that is just 12. There's no negatives because 19 is bigger than 7. And so now I just have 4 times x equals 12. All right, and then I'm going to use my same strategy and get rid of the times 4. And so again, how did we get rid of times 4? Well, the opposite of multiplication is division. So I am going to take and I'm going to divide by 4. Well, remember, dividing by 4 can look like a fraction or it can look like a division symbol. And since we're solving, I'm going to go ahead and make it look like a fraction. So if I divide by 4 on one side, I have to divide by 4 on the other, and these cancel out. And now I have x left over here, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. I did not have to use my integer man because, again, there were no negatives. So my answer is x equals 3. Now I need to check my answer. I need to make sure without a doubt that I got the right answer. So I'm going to plug in my answer of 3. So I took the letter x out and put the number 3, and remember, parentheses means multiply. So what is 4 times 3? Well, that's going to be 12. And then 12 plus 7 is 19. So does 19 equal 19? Yes. So we did prove our answer correct. All right, let's try the exact same thing on the next problem. So in our next problem, we're starting off and we have 2 operations again. We have some division and we have some subtraction. And so I don't need to rewrite my problem this time because I didn't have any parentheses or any variables next to letters. And so this time I can just start by drawing my line down the equal sign. Remember, in the end, I want x to be alone. So I'm going to go ahead and create my do-undo chart over here off to the side. And again, this is to keep us extra organized and make sure that we are not doing anything that we're not supposed to when it comes to solving. So remember, we always undo adding and subtracting first, and then multiplying and dividing second, because it's the opposite of PEMDAS, or order of operations. Okay, is we're doing it backwards because we're solving for the x. We're getting x alone. Okay, if we were solving with order of operations, we would obviously flip this. All right, so as I look at my problem, the first thing I need to find is my adding or subtracting. Well, in this case, I have -8. And so how do I get rid of -8? Well, I am going to add 8. So again, the opposite of subtracting is adding. All right, and then the second thing I need to get rid of is going to be the dividing, right? Remember, anytime it looks like cowboy and horse, that's division. And so what are they doing? They are dividing, and this time they're dividing by a negative. So I have divided by -2. So when we are doing the undo, how do we undo dividing? Well, that is multiplying. And if they're dividing by -2, I'm still going to keep the -2. I'm multiplying by -2. So again, opposites, yes. Because remember, we're just changing the operation. So the opposite of subtracting was adding. The opposite of multiplying was dividing. All right, and so we're ready to do that to our problem. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, okay, how do I get rid of subtracting 8? The way to do that is going to be that plus 8. So if I do plus 8 here, what happens? This becomes 0. And I can't do it to just one side, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it on the other side as well. I'm going to rewrite what's left. So I have x divided by -2, and then 10 plus 8 is 18. All right, I'm still not done because x is not alone, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my division now. I've got to get rid of that division. So how does the opposite of dividing? Well, we said that was multiplying. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to multiply by negative 2, and those cancel each other out. And now all that's left is x. And over here, I'm going to multiply by negative 2. And in this problem, I did need my integer man because there's a negative. So I'm going to throw him on there. And I'm going to say, okay, 18 is positive, 2 is negative. So my answer should be negative 36. Okay. And then again, we're going to prove our answer. So we're going to go back and plug in our answer. So instead of x, we're going to put in negative 36. We're going to need our integer man because we're dividing with a negative. So 36 was negative, 2 was negative, so my answer should be positive 18. 18 minus 8 is 10, and 10 does in fact equal 10. All right, so today we are focusing on our do-undo table, and we're focusing on making sure we double check, did we use our integer rules? All right, go practice.